Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Technologies of the Future weekly webinar with Q&A. You can see Andrew is jumping on. I'll get you to hide from here. There we go. As I introduce everyone this morning, it is actually Plastic-Free July. So we thought it would be a really great opportunity to talk about plastics. And I'm going to kick us off this morning with a little passage from the book Project Drawdown, which is the most comprehensive guide to solve climate change. And I'm on page 651, and this is solution number 47, which is materials bioplastic. The first and only bioplastic car was unveiled by Henry Ford in 1941 in Dearborn, Michigan. The car was inspired by the growing shortage of metal due to the war, as well as by the idea of combining industry with agriculture. He already had established the soybean laboratory in Greenfield Village at the time and had made the fuel for the car from hemp oil. The frame was tubular steel, the body was plastic, the windows were acrylic, and it was powered by a conventional 60 horsepower engine. The finished car weighed 1,000 pounds less than its conventional all-steel counterpart. Though it was created in part to aid the war effort, most car manufacturing ceased for the duration of the war, and the bioplastic car was never revived. From the Stone Age to the Iron Age to the Steel Age, we delineate societies' epochs by their primary material for fabrication. Ours could be called the Age of Plastic. Globally, we produce roughly 310 million tonnes of plastic each year. That is 83 pounds per person, and plastic production is expected to quadruple by 2050. The material is everywhere, from clothing to computers, furniture to football fields, and almost all of it's petroplastic, made from fossil fuels. In fact, 5 to 6% of the world's annual oil production becomes feedstock for plastic manufacturing. But the polymers that make up plastic exist everywhere in nature, not just as fossilized forms, and experts estimate that 90% of the current plastics could be derived from plants or other renewable feedstock instead. Such bio-based plastics come from the earth, and many can return to it, often with lowered carbon emissions and their fossil fuel-based kin. I'm going to cough quickly. Thank you. The Greek verb plasion, the root of plastic, means to mold or shape. What affords plastics their malleability are polymers, substances with chain-like structures made of many atoms or molecules bound to one another. Most have a backbone of carbon, linked with other elements such as hydrogen, nitrogen, or oxygen. We can synthesize polymers, but they also occur naturally all around and inside us. They are part of every living organism. Cellulose, the most abundant organic material on Earth, is a polymer in the cell walls of plants. Chitin is another abundant polymer found in the shells and exoskeletons of crustaceans and insects. Potatoes, sugarcane, tree bark, algae, and shrimp all contain natural polymers that can be converted to plastic. I'm going to pull it up there, and I'm going to invite online some experts this morning to have a conversation around Plastic-Free July, and a little bit of inspiration around what we can all do at home to make a difference in the world this month, and hopefully habits that can carry us forward. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Christina, Andrew, Franziska.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hi.
Hey, Andrew, Christina, Lisa.
Hello.
I'm going to ask you all for a one-word opener. How are you feeling? Franziska.
I feel cold.
Andrew?
I feel a bit geeked out. I've got my Bazinga t-shirt on.
Christina?
I feel environmental today.
Lovely. I'm going to take a word out of Louis' book, and I'm going to make it one. Free Thought Friday, where it's the opportunity just to have some free thoughts on a Friday and think big, and that 10% of moonshot thinking is going to come through today. I know it. So we're talking about Plastic-Free July today, and we talk about mindset, technology, and impact. I'll start with mindset. How is your mindset on Plastic-Free July, and have you heard many people talking about it?
Franziska,
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, definitely happy to kick it off. Yes, we've actually done Plastic Free July here at our headquarters for a few years, and it's quite interesting. A few years ago, maybe when we first started, maybe 6, 7 years ago, when we first started, the first time we were aware of it as a team, it really changed some of our behaviors, including some of my behaviors that, I'm embarrassed to admit, but let's say I would still back then every now and then go and get a coffee, or maybe more than every now and then, out of a coffee cup from the coffee shop. And then because we did the 30 days or 31 days without any plastics at all at our offices, basically we were banning anyone to bring any containers or cups or bottles in that were plastic. It suddenly changed our behaviors. Now, when one of us goes to the coffee shop and we forget our cup to bring with, it makes us feel bad. So this whole movement has really changed behaviors, and now we do it again. We have a few new team members that have never done it before, and just this morning one of my girls, Ashley, walked in with her own takeaway cup, her reusable one, and she said, "Oh my God, I feel so good." She said, "I feel like a changed human." She wasn't used to that behavior. So yeah, the mindset around this, I think, and the shift in how we think is quite huge.
It actually reminds me when we went to the United Nations, Franziska, a few years ago, and they've actually got no single-use plastics all over the entry and where you're going, and they check all of your bags and make you get rid of them before going into the building.
Yes. And just one thought that I shared yesterday with the team, we had a quick catch up with the global team on Zoom about Plastic Free July, because anyone can do it, not just us, our core team here in our offices in Sydney. And one thing I shared is that the thing we need to be aware of when we use, let's say, our water bottles is, and I said this to Christina, I saw Christina and Lisa also at a gala the other night, we need to make sure that we don't just use this once or twice and then lose it. Because I broke one of your bottles that you gave me unintentionally. And that's also not so good, because if we only use this a few times and then we have to buy another one, to make this is almost worse than, buying 2 plastic bottles. So we need to also make sure that this fine line of, okay, I'm feeling good because I'm using this, but make sure that I keep this for a long time, so I don't have to go and buy another one that will, take resources to produce.
I think that's actually mentioned in Homo sapiens. The book, it talks about how many items we actually have in our lifetime. So if you think from cradle to grave, that many years ago, thousands and hundreds of thousands of years ago, we might have 80 items, or maximum maybe 500 items. I don't know the exact, can't remember the exact figure, but it was like 500 items in our lifetime. And the book mentions that nowadays we have about at least 5 million items in our lifetime. You just think of the environmental impact of every one human having 5 million items is massive. Christina or Andrew, mindset around Plastic Free July.
Yeah, well, I think it's an awesome initiative. We know the damage of plastics and consumption broadly. But I was chatting to someone the other day that back in my primary school, I remember in grade 3, this would have been early 90s, we did an assignment on the environment. And the mindset back then, at least in what I was taught in that little bubble, was plastics are good because they stop us tearing down the Amazon for paper. So at that point, it was use plastics because it's a byproduct from petroleum. Petroleum's already being used. Instead of tearing down the Amazon for paper and disposable things, use plastic. Which was all fine and good when plastics were so small and the Amazon the destruction of trees was so big. But now you look at the amount of pollution that it's led to, and it doesn't mean that what we thought at that time with the limited knowledge was wrong, but it's not appropriate for where we are today. So I think it's a great initiative.
That reminds me of the launch of, I think it was Tupperware in the 50s. And I got this just because I was watching a lovely show about 1950s housewives. It was a comedian, which was hilarious because I never watched television, but she actually had this brand new invention. It was amazing. It was Tupperware and it was going to change the world. And I think even about that, they've got a lifetime guarantee. And I know that because my nan and my aunties, if you go to a Tupperware party, they'll bring back their Tupperware that they bought 50 years ago, and it might have a broken lid that gets replaced or something like that. And I think the intent of that, where it's a single item that lasts a very long time or lasts a lifetime, is brilliant. And that's probably not quite where we are today. Christina?
In response to what Andrew said, I think that's why we keep talking in first order, second order consequences, because at the time that was, it was a good idea. I found it fascinating. So following on from what Franziska said, when we ran the summit in 2019, we were going green. And I remember so we gave everybody a reusable cup, and that's where you got the glass bottle from, and we'll replace that, Franziska. I'll bring you one next time I see you. But I actually had to intentionally go around, and even though we'd asked the venue several times, I went around and collected all the plastic cups and the coffee cups that were out that were not that were single use, and put them away, because we had asked the venue several times, but clearly the message hadn't got through. So, it has always been top of mind for me. And I remember, my grandmother, going shopping with my grandmother and having all her bags. And if I actually go to the supermarket and I end up there not planned without my shopping bags, I'll seek a box from somewhere. I can't do it. I'm very much like the mindset that you mentioned, Francis. I can't do it. I just can't do the plastic thing.
And so what sort of technologies, if we move over to technology, you're seeing, I know for me, I love polymateria, and I met Neil Dunn at the World Economic Forum a few years ago, and it's actually a plastic cup, but it is biodegradable, and it's got on the side, this cup will self-destruct, and it self-destructs down to, I think it's like a water and a wax once it's compressed or the use by date is done. And they're doing huge contracts with large companies like 7-Eleven in India that's going to be able to have a huge impact on the environment. What are you all seeing in technology?
I think there's so much actually that is being done, which is so encouraging in terms of the technology that is being used and the inventions. And there are a few that come to mind. Actually, just one on a sort of more micro level is one of our own clients that we work with. They're a branding client. They are actually a plastic company. So they take plastic and then make stuff from their plastic. But they right now, and that's why they want to rebrand, they are looking at only using recycled plastic. So they're working with a paint company that sells paint. And this paint company in Australia, they collect the buckets where they sell the paint in, and then the buckets go back to this plastic company that we work with and gets recycled into another product, like a paintbrush thing where I don't know what it's called, blah, like it's just another product made from these plastic buckets. The difficulty that he said is that you have to separate everything. So you get the buckets, but then the lids you can't use for this. You have to take the label off. So it's quite intensive. So sometimes, and I'm of that mindset too. I'm like, why can't we recycle, more? Why can't we take all this rubbish and make something new of it? And these manufacturers, they tell me that you have to separate everything. It's very detailed what you can use and what you can't use. So that's one. Another one that you may have all heard of is Plastic Bank. They're out of Canada, and the founder is great. And he's founded this company a while ago, and he is incentivizing people to both collect rubbish from places, but also recycle more. And I believe he started in Haiti actually with this project. And I may be wrong here. Maybe you guys, have the facts right. And he's using blockchain to give out tokens for people who are recycling and collecting rubbish. One last one I'll quickly mention, which I believe you may be across to, you guys, is the Sea Bin project in Australia. And so that launched out of Australia, where they use sea bins in harbors and marine areas that are, they sort of move around with the tides and then filter the seawater to capture any floating waste. And that's pretty cool too. And then of course there's lots of there's a drone one too, actually. That one, I believe that's a Dutch company. I think it's called Waste Shark, and they use a water drone also to that sort of floats around the water and then collects the rubbish, which is really cool too.
I love that, Franziska, and I love the fact that you've mentioned all these much smaller companies that are all having this effect, and they're growing clearly. You know, some of them aren't so small anymore. I'll use the example of a large drink company who I won't name, but they're working on having completely plant-based bottles by the year 2030. So, you know, which will make a huge difference. And they're also using, so when you mentioned the recycled and repurposed, the plastic, they're collecting all the caps, the plastic caps that they have in all the bottles, and they're using those in 3D printing machines to create paper clips or other small devices that they otherwise may have gone to, you know, to a stationary organization to buy. They're 3D printing them out of these recycled plastics. So I think technology is having a great impact on a lot of the ways that we can fix this problem. And it's also a great way to let people know that they need to be taking action against the problem or for the problem as well.
I love some of these technologies. I think about, like you say, Franziska, when you mentioned the breaking down and being able to recycle something. And it was something that I started learning about a number of years ago because Adidas were talking about it when you're actually recycling your runners. So if you think about a pair of shoes, the actual human capital that's required to take out the shoelaces and the little steel things that the shoelaces go in and all of the rest. And so what you'll notice with a lot of footwear now, they changed to be all one material, and they launched their Future Loop shoe, I think it is, or Future Craft, something. It was a Future Loop, I think it is, and it's made with all one material, and it's 3D printed, and so you can send it back and then they can break it down and then they 3D print it into another shoe. And I think that was super cool. And I look at the trends and the transition of technology now, and just to add to the conversation around microplastics and nanoplastics. And it's been found that it's another, you know, new material. It's the breakdown of the plastics in the ocean that is actually now found in Antarctica all the way through the Arctic. It's pretty much in all of the oceans all over the world. And so some of the solutions that I really love reading about are the magnet type solutions that they're actually finding. And there's this one that was on the World Economic Forum the other day. It's like a magnet, and you put it in the water and it just swirls around and it attracts all of the nano and microplastics in that area, which I thought is super cool. And so when you hear about the larger scale, like Seabin, that's collecting a lot of these ocean plastics, and then these solutions that are going to collect the nanoplastics and microplastics as well, I kind of get really optimistic about the future, in that it is such a huge problem, but science can save the day. And I hope to see a lot of sci-fi movies around this to encourage more people to innovate in the space. But Andrew, I'm going to ask you about technology.
Yeah, I love the idea of changing behavior. That company you mentioned, Franziska, of using Bitcoin, because a lot of this is the changing of behavior at that household level and that everyday level, and that reward system does wonders. I wonder how much the recycling industry needs to change as well to support this. For example, even within different councils, or when I come up to New South Wales, something that's not recyclable in my council in Victoria is in New South Wales. I think there's a lot of exceptions, for example, that people are just not conscious that they're doing, that they would like to do, but given just another piece of information, more rules, more conditions, I must take the cap off the bottle. This plastic is, but this plastic is not. People almost get a cognitive overload. The kitchen's on, the kids are running around, and I've got to decide, is this plastic, can this go in or not? Screw it, I'm just putting it in. I'm just throwing it out. So I think the industry might have a way to go to improve people's decision making, or make it easier for people to recycle. As well, the other interesting thing was there's companies that have been working on enzymes that help break down those polymers that you were talking about, and I think that we'll probably see some great things coming from that as well, that could make make those nanoplastics almost innocuous and just, you know, a little carbon atom with a few hydrogen poking out of it that's no different to anything else.
That's very cool. Craig, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And you don't have sound. You're not on mute, but it's a microphone thing. There we are.
Very good. Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be on here. What a fascinating conversation this morning.
Thank you. And are you familiar with any technologies or plastic-free July? And are you doing anything in your home or workplace?
Well, it's quite interesting. I'm sitting here and we're talking about plastics and, you know, plastic-free and technology, and I'm looking in front of me and the amount of plastic I have in front of me inside the technology I'm currently using is kind of interesting for me. And I was kind of fascinated because I haven't delved into this to kind of ask, what are we seeing in the way of computers and cameras and technology where potentially we're going to be looking away from the plastics or even the metals that aren't biodegradable, and what could be the future of all this technology we are using for everyday use that's becoming more and more and more as everyone has a cell phone. People have at least one laptop or one computer in their household. For me, I have multiple screens. Like, what can we do in this space? I don't know. Does anyone have any experience in this?
Well, it's interesting because I think in terms of material science, we're always going to need materials. And so for me, it's how do you create a circular economy for that? And do you get allocated a certain amount of materials at birth, and that you actually within your own home, you keep continually recycling those through a 3D printer or something like that? Or, you know, is it in a local community where you're swapping and sharing? And actually, Franziska, you're not buying any new clothes this year, you shared with me before.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to not buy much of anything this year, but definitely no clothing items, no shoes. But in all fairness, I have more than enough. You know, like, it's an easy thing for me to say that I'm not buying anything. I'm going to continue it probably for another year, but I'm also a fortunate person to have enough things. You know, we all probably do. But it's quite a good challenge, actually, to challenge my partner too. And he already broke the challenge, which was really actually quite disappointing.
So I've been buying vintage clothes. If I need anything new, Franziska, it's been vintage. But just on with the technology, Craig, I was having a chat. I took an old laptop. It was a 17-inch laptop. My partner needed a new computer. I went, I think we can get around this. I took a laptop in and had it upgraded. So they took the old hard drive out, put a new hard drive in. It's a perfect machine for what he wants. And one of the interesting comments that the technician made was they don't make machines like this anymore. It's not that old. It's not that old. And they break much more easily because of that. You know, we're in this, we've got to upgrade economy. So that really needs to be led by some of the top companies. But, you know, the fact that this machine could be upgraded, could have a new hard drive, could give a new life. I think we all need to think about that as well when we're upgrading our technologies.
We're actually almost at time today, which is such a shame. I know we could actually talk for a very long time on this topic. So I'm going to move to a little bit of impact. I'm going to ask you each to start to wrap us up with a vision for the future. And so the question is, based on what we've been talking about, we've just woken up. It's the year 2042, 20 years into the future. What does the world look like? And Christina, I'm going to start with you.
Thanks. So for me, the world does look like we're living very minimalist. Okay, every time you ask me that question, I get flashes of the accommodation in Star Trek, where people just hit a button, walked in, and it was all very sparse. So I think we won't have great needs because our needs will be met as a huge society, as a global society, and we will be in the actual habit of using. Potentially we'll have moved on from 3D printers, but it will be that constant recycling. Let's put it back in whatever the source is, come back out with the new product that we need, or something that is upgraded. But I think we'll be living very minimalist, and I think we'll be very comfortable with that because we'll have found so much more value in the individual and in our soulness rather than in our thingness.
Amazing. Craig?
Yeah, it's interesting to think, you know, here we are in 2022, and I kind of see a lot of things that have come full circle. You know, we look back to when I was growing up in kind of the late 70s and 80s, where people would grow their own vegetables, would be quite self-sustainable. We didn't have all this extra materials that we do now. And COVID's kind of helped a lot of people go back to more of that simple life. So I'm hoping in the kind of 20 plus years time that we're able to sustain a lot of that and be able to take it even a step further. We're obviously doing a lot more work online as we are today. And hopefully we can hold that, because it's so easy to jump on a plane again and fly around the world to somewhere else, which I know is exciting, but how can we limit that? So it's going to be a curious time. I look forward to it.
Amazing. Andrew?
Yeah, Christina, I love your reference to Star Trek, and I'd love to see that when I wake up in 2040 something, where you push a button and all the molecules are configured into whatever it is that they need, because 90% of them are hydrogen, carbon, oxygen. And then once you're done, you dispose of it, they get broken back down and then reconfigured into whatever it is that you want. How perfect is that?
I love it. Franziska?
Yeah, for me, it's really a summary of what you guys said. So it's two things. It's one is prevention of pollution. And it's interesting, and hopefully this society of more will come back to being more minimalistic. And I was just in Europe visiting my mom. I think it's a generational thing, because I still love this. She lives in a way where her washing machine is 20 years old and she takes care of it, and it's perfectly functioning. And just the way that she cares for items is a lot less, let's just buy new and throw it out. It's a lot more, let's take care of our garments and not have a dryer, and just this way of living is very much, it's beautiful. And I think that's what I'm seeing for all of us to get back to. And then secondly, of course, is to use technology to clean up the mess that we have made so far, and the pollution that we have especially in the oceans also. That's my passion. So that's my vision.
I love it. For me, I think I'll follow on for that is that we actually know the impact that we're having, and that whether it be the microplastics or nanoplastics, we're conscious about it. I'm going to drop a final link in the chat here, and it's a study that Andrew Forrest, he actually did his PhD on nanoplastics and the impact on the human body and the brain. And I think in the chat, Stephen asked about that. And knowing what it does. And so I'm envisioning in the future, in 20 years, we might actually be able to track nanoplastics from space and then be able to deploy the little magnets to collect the nanoplastics or whatever it may be. Sounds a little bit Matrix-like, but we are able to clean up the environment, but we know the impact that it has on our health. And so if anyone needs a little bit of inspiration to get on board for Plastic Free July, just think about the impact that we're all individually having on the environment, and if there is something that we can do in our lives that's going to make that shift for ourselves and our families, and the ripple effects that will make a difference in the world. And with that, I will wrap us up, and thank you all so much. Thank you, Franziska, for joining us, Craig, Andrew, Christina, Hayley behind the scenes, and everyone who's joined us live online here today and also in our online learning community.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
See you all.